Any modern reader who read today's gospel or who listened to today's gospel may be bothered by some of the things that one just heard. We hear Jesus saying, amongst other things, if you're not going to hate, that's the word, if you're not going to hate your mother or your father, your wife or your children, you cannot be my disciple. Later on he says, if you don't give up your possessions, all that you have, you cannot be my disciple. How do we, as the modern reader/listener, get to what Jesus is truly saying? 2 weeks ago in the pastor's message and in the bulletin, I made mention of how Jesus used various techniques to get the audience's, the crowd's attention. So he spoke in different terms and terminologies, sometimes using metaphors to draw the attention of the crowd. How can a God speak about hating someone when we believe God is love? In fact, the commandments are very clear. Love God with everything and honor your mother and your father. And if anyone wants to know if you're my disciple, they must see in you the deliberate love you choose to show to all the people in your life. So, beloved, how do we understand what Jesus is saying? People will always make assumptions/judgments based on what someone says or what someone does. In a classroom, for instance, the teacher has to make an assessment of a student based on what the student puts on the paper. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine went with his family to visit their family overseas. And they were struck by how the son of the overseas family spoke to the parents. He seemed to always wanted to guide them and help them. But somehow he seemed to also come across as being harsh. And so my friend would say to him, you need to calm down. You need to take a chill pill, because your choice of words really are driving your parents away from you. Beloved, when Jesus speaks, we at first hear his words, but we are modern listeners seeking to understand what's going on. And so the first thing to understand is we are a people who make judgments on what we hear and what we see. But we must always keep in mind that there's always more to what we hear or what we see. Going back to the example, when that particular son overseas was asked, why do you speak so harshly to your parents? The son said the following, I don't know how much longer I will be alive. So I'm trying to help my parents. 1, let go of me. 2, make sure they understand all that they have to do when I am gone. So what we have is, on the surface, what seemed like a harsh approach to one's parents at the time. The son actually had it in mind to help the parents to not only learn how to let go, but even to make sure that when he's gone, the things that he used to do for them, they would be able to take up the slack. When Jesus speaks, we at first listen and ponder, but we must now get to part 2, which is, what is the message or the intention behind it? The teacher who marks the student's paper and gives him a passing grade, that student will come and ask the teacher, how come my grade is so low? And very often the teacher has to show what the student left out, and then sometimes point to another paper where someone really excelled in answering that particular point or question. So that, beloved, in recognizing that we are sometimes too quick to jump to conclusions based on what we hear or see, we must also try to get behind the story. In biblical language, we have to get to the heart of the matter. Whereas people look and judge based on what we hear and see, we are told in Scripture, God looks at the heart. God looks at the heart. Someone with a loving heart may or may not say the right words. Someone with a heart that truly gives of itself may not necessarily always do the right thing. But because the heart is in the right place, God blesses that person. God blesses the people whose hearts are right with him. In today's gospel, Jesus speaks hyperbole. A God cannot exist in a place of sin or darkness. So a God of love cannot sanction someone hating someone else. What Jesus is doing is drawing their attention once again and letting them look within and asking the question, do I truly put God first? Do I truly understand that when God takes hold of me, he's not only refining me on the journey, but he sees the state of my heart and he wants to pull me closer to him. And so when Jesus says in today's gospel, if you're going to be my disciple, you must hate mother and father, what he's really doing is saying, have you understood that I, your God, cannot be placed on the same level of your parents, your wife, your husband, your children, your family, or your friends? I must be placed as your priority. Why? Because I'm the God who gives you life. I'm the God who blesses you. And above all, when others don't understand you, I am the God who sees your heart. And because I see your heart, and if you put me first in your heart, everything will fall in place. Which then leads to the third and final point. If our hearts are truly right with God, beloved, no individual, no asset, no private possession will ever take God's place. In fact, if our hearts are truly right with God, love God with everything that you are and have, we don't need to be told God must be placed above any individual or possession. Because when the heart gives itself, it truly makes the other priority. When the heart truly lends itself away from self to the other, it truly desires the benefit of the other. And so how then do we bring everything together? By giving God our hearts, here's the irony. We learn how to love mother, father, children, wife, husband, family, friend the way we should. It no longer becomes a selfish love. It becomes a love that is life-giving for the other, even if the other or others don't recognize that it is happening. For we have a God who breathes life into us, and he helps us to actually love him the way we should. And the more we put God at the center of our lives, the more our hearts become right with each other. How sad it is that so many parents today lament, my children have forgotten me. How sad it is to hear family and friends break off for whatever reason, because the hearts are no longer connected. But when our hearts are right with God, beloved, everything falls into place. And that also includes our possessions. Yes, God blesses us with our assets and our possessions. But you've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. We all have to ask ourselves the following question. Am I so possessed by my own possessions that I have made no room for God in my life? Is all that I am defined by what I have? Do I spend more energy trying to get and gain and increase my possessions? But when it comes to energy in pursuing the things of God, that usually gets knocked to the end of the list. Beloved, God is love. And the more we spend time pondering that real, true, honest statement, the more the only response we will have is to love God with everything to always put him above every person, anything, any experience we may have. But the irony, as I just said, is that when we do that, the people in our lives are brought back in a very special way. We see possessions for what they are, blessings from God to be used to bless other people. And if there's anything else, when all seems to go awry, this God who knows our hearts will do all that he can to pull us closer to him. To this great God, beloved, of life, love, and joy, be glory and praise forever and ever.